This is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.
Friday. Kick off the Winter Olympics in style with the opening ceremony from Italy, featuring a special performance by Mariah Carey. Celebrate the greatest athletes from around the globe as they come together to go for gold.
Lindsey Vonn, sensational!
The opening ceremony of the Winter Olympics.
Ilya Malinin.
Redefining the sport.
Friday at 8 Eastern, 7 Central on NBC and Peacock.
Body Bags with Joseph Scott Morgan. I've been having these ongoing discussions with my buddy Dave Mack. And the one thing that Dave and I have in common, other than gray hair, is annoying back injuries. It's just one of those things that just sticks with you. It's nagging. And just briefly, let me tell you how I wound up with back pain. When I was 20 or so, I started working in the morgue. And the thing about working in the morgue as an autopsy assistant, back then, I had no help. So daily, I would go into the morgue, and being young and arrogant and not knowing the limitations of my mortal body, I would move other bodies sometimes that outweighed me times two. I literally remember having a 500-pound body fall on me one day in the morgue by myself. It was terrifying, and not in the sense that ghosties and goblins and those sorts of things. It was terrifying thinking this is literally dead weight, and I am going to have to extricate myself from this body. And then once I do, I'm still faced with the prospect of getting the body up off the floor. Now, think about that in a sense of you're a 130-pound woman. And for whatever reason, you don't like your husband too much. And you decide to take his life. The only problem is, once you take his life, what do you do with him? How are you going to move him? Because this guy is 300 pounds plus. What do? Do you call on help? Do you call on adrenaline? Or do you wish it to disappear? Well, in today's case, we're going to talk about an individual that certainly took initiative in the case involving her husband and his homicide. But she put in a lot of hard work, but still to no end. Today, we're going to talk about what is now being referred to as the burn pile murder involving Melody Farris out of Georgia. I'm Joseph Scott Morgan, and this is Body Bags. Many people, Dave, have heard the term dead weight, and they really don't understand what it is. I've tried to describe it. Generally, the only way I can really describe it to people is picking up a sack of taters. All right, a really big sack of taters. The sack of taters don't help you when you're moving them. You have to do it yourself. Or if you've ever been in the military, filling sandbags, moving sandbags don't help you. You know, when people are alive, you don't think about it. But when you, let's say, for instance, even if you're a more diminutive person, you wrap your arms around somebody and you pick them up. People don't understand kind of the biomechanics of this and the fact that the person that is being picked up is technically helping you because of their inner ear, their equilibrium. They adjust. Now, sometimes this winds up badly, but it's different than dead weight. And in our case today, we've got this diminutive wife who decided that she was going to do something rather ghastly with her husband's remains, who, by the way, she had murdered.
Wow. The story of the burn pile murder, Melody Farris accused of killing her husband, Gary Farris, 58 years old at the time. He's a big guy. a little pushing 300 pounds. Well, he was like 6'4". He was not a small man. Her 130-pound frame. I thought the first thing was she either had help or something else. Well,
wait. Let me freeze you right there. You know what Kim said? My wife said when I told her that we were going to do this case, because she's kind of been following it. She said she had to have had a wheelbarrow. That's what Kim was saying.
Sure.
Well, and so you have to think of it that way.
Well, here's what else though. In looking at the case, the actual geography of the area, they have a 10-acre farm in Georgia, just outside of Atlanta, and when you look at pictures overhead, the map view, it doesn't show the terrain. And even looking at some of the pictures there, it didn't show the grade of the hill.
Yep.
It was only a juror that went there to the scene because they were able to take this has been adjudicated, and they took the jury out to the scene. And that was what convinced a juror that Melody Farris could do it by herself. And so I listened to her, and she explained it. The grade from the house to the burn pile was actually enough of a grade downhill that gravity could have had something to do with her ability to get him in there by herself. Now, Joe, I have to ask you this right now because you have followed it, and you mentioned Kim. We have a couple that's been married for 3 decades. There has been infidelity. There's been a lot going on here in this case. But you have a man, a very large man, who actually dies and falls into the burn pit. When police are called to the scene, when they get the call, they show up because there's a dude that is burned to death in the burn pile, and they thought he had a heart attack and fell in. That some type of medical issue happened. They did not at first think he had been murdered and then drugged into the burn pile.
Right.
And it was at first, it looked at that way. I say at first, but I know that there's 2 things that happen in an investigation. Yeah. There is the thing that they talk to in the media and other people. And then there's the thing they talk about amongst themselves. Something hinky here. Something ain't right.
Yeah.
And that's what happened in this case. While they publicly were saying, we believe that he had a medical emergency of some sort.
Right.
And fell into the burn pile. And that's what caused his demise. And he was burned enough that he had to be identified by dental records. So this lays out a case for us, Joseph Scott Morgan, and I'm so glad. I'm not glad we're covering it because it means that somebody is dead in a very heinous way.
Brother, this is what we do, man. We can't flee from that. That's what we do. Yeah.
But after doing the show with you many times, you have discussed what it would take to build a fire, to break down a body to the point where you couldn't identify it. And you have said on this show to me many times, you would have to have that thing burning really hot and for a really long time.
Yep. Yeah, you do. And it takes a protracted period of time. And let me direct our friends here to a video if you've never seen it out there. And it's actually on YouTube, and it is a video. I think it's called Secrets of the Body Farm. And people think that it's all going to be about skeletal remains. And it's not, because they actually do testing. And this is gruesome. I got to tell you, right from Jump Street, it's very gruesome. The forensic anthropology PhD students, what they will do up there is actually dismember a body. And they will, starting using charcoal, charcoal that you get in a bag. They'll start with multiple bags of charcoal, and they'll get a fire rolling with it. And they have a big pit, and then they feed it with wood. And then they'll take a dismembered human remain, and this is actually on camera. I've actually had students that left the room when they were watching. This is available on YouTube. It's not like, I guess there might be an age requirement. I have no idea. That's not my area. It's down the hall and to the left. But you can see just with a single arm, the arm beginning to contract, and the reason it contracts is, we have this, the way the body is structured, all of the connected tissue as a result of the heat responds to the heat by drawing up. So, if you find a body that has been burned, you'll have them in what's referred to as the fighter's position or the pugilistic position. The hands actually draw up to the face and the head. Like pugilism is actually a term that used to be applied to boxing. You're a pugilist. And they didn't know the term boxing, so they would talk about pugilism. Well, it's called a pugilistic posture. So the hands contract, the fingers, the wrists contract, the elbows contract, and even the shoulders and the arms will draw up like this. It almost looks like they're in a protective pose as opposed to, like an attack pose. But the only thing they could really come up with is, hey, this person looks like a boxer. And the reason I bring up this idea, the Secrets of the Body Farm, I think that's the name of the title. Somebody correct me. But is that it gives you a real insight into what we see at the scenes. And you're talking about, first off, you do have the initial spot on heat that you're dealing with at that moment in time, where you introduce a body into a bonfire, and let's say you've got it rolling for a while. It might be, I don't know, anywhere from 900 to maybe top in 1300 degrees, and you'll get that initial burst of heat when a body is exposed to that. However, the big part with outdoor bonfires and burn pits is that the fires, and I think this might be what you're getting to, Dave, fires have to be tended. Well, if fires are tended, you have to have them in a position where you have ongoing fuel. You have an uninterrupted source of oxygen. Okay, where oxygen is free flowing, it's fueling. You have to have oxygen to have fire. And then you have to have fuel in the form of wood or something else that's flammable to maintain that heat. Because have you ever seen a fire that'll kind of go cold? It'll be warm,
Mm-hmm.
but when you add fuel to it, again, it kind of burst up. And in order to sustain that level of heat, not only do you have to put wood or another fuel source on it, but you also have to turn it. And whatever happened out there at that burn pit when his body was taken out there, Dave, his body was burned to the point that you have what are referred to as fourth degree burns. Most people don't think about fourth degree burns. They only think about first, second, third. Well, if you have fourth degree burning means that you literally have elements of the skeleton that are visible. Now, do living people actually have fourth degree burns and can survive? Because your chances of surviving third degree burns are slim and none. It's dependent upon where the surface area that's involved. Fourth degree burns, I have heard of these cases where people are trapped in a location, and it's generally like a burning vehicle. The fire is only, say, making contact with maybe the feet and the ankles, and the rest of the body is protected. There have been cases where people's feet have literally been burned off. And if you can, if you can prevent them from going into shock, you can survive it. But this guy had fourth degree burns all over his body to the point where his ribs were all visible. And it creates a real problem for you as an investigator, because what's the purpose of fire? Well, it's not just a heat source. It's used to destroy things. Okay. That's why those with malevolent intentions use fire, because they're trying to eradicate any evidence that might be there, anything that would wipe away their connection to perhaps a death or maybe some other bit of evidence involving a nefarious action that they might have been engaged in. But we do know this. With the body of this gentleman, that Melody Farris essentially torched. This is her own husband, who she has created a family with and had children. We do know that heat was applied by her in order to eradicate any memory of him.
Friday. Kick off the Winter Olympics in style with the opening ceremony from Italy, featuring a special performance by Mariah Carey. Celebrate the greatest athletes from around the globe as they come together to go for gold.
Lindsey Vonn, sensational!
The opening ceremony of the Winter Olympics.
Ilya Malinin.
Redefining this sport.
Friday at 8 Eastern, 7 Central on NBC and Peacock.
I don't know what it takes, Dave. I've thought about this for many years. What button has to be pushed so that it drives an individual to look at the person that's laying in bed next to them, or maybe in this case, occupying another wing of the home? We'll get into that in a second. What drives this individual to the point where they say, okay, I'm not going to leave. I'm not going to walk away and start my life over. What drives that person to the point where, okay, I'm going to take a firearm fired into their body and burn them up? I still to this day, I don't know that there is a specific point that is uniform, along the spectrum. I don't know if there is an actual trigger point for that, but I've always been fascinated by the proverbial straw that broke the camel's back. And I think that there were a lot of these instances throughout this marriage, weren't there, Dave?
Gary Farris was a very successful attorney in Atlanta, a corporate attorney dealing with a lot of big businesses, a lot of big money.
Yeah.
And they had some squabbles about money. And when Gary finally took her off the bank account, it was like, yeah, I trust you and we're going to work this out, but you're not having access to this anymore. And there were some accusations made about what she had done with money, and which gave him the reason to do it. We have a relationship pretty much in ruins when it comes to trust. You mentioned early on what would make somebody look over the person that they've been spending their life with and decide, I'm going to take this person out and I'm going to do it in such a way that I can get away with it. He's going to be dead and I'm going to burn his remains in the fire so they can't even find out what killed him. And to be honest with you, it almost worked, Joe. The only thing that really hit, and there's so many questions I have in this for you, okay?
Right.
When police are called to the scene, the body had been on the fire long enough to be down to where they could not identify him. They didn't know how tall he was because of what was left of the remains. Yep. You mentioned his rib cage was showing, and after they look at him and identify him with dental records, then they notice, hey, there's a bullet in one of these ribs.
Yep.
And all of a sudden, now it's a murder investigation. It's a homicide. And I want to know, and I wrote it down because there are things we don't know even after the trial, Joe. We do not know. I mean this. We know that Gary Farris had a bullet in his rib, one of his ribs. But we do not know where he was shot. We don't know when he was shot. We don't know how his body ended up on the burn pile. He could have been shot right there and then pushed in the burn pile, or he could have been murdered in the basement of the house and drugged down to the burn pile. But even after the trial, we don't know. And you're the investigator.
I don't know that, brother. I don't know that we'll ever know, sequencing here, because again, you still have that bit of doubt that exists there. And I think that if this case ever went up on appeal, that could be an underpinning, to kind of build that whole process out. It's fascinating to me because one of the things that you lose with the burned bodies, and this goes to what you had mentioned about getting getting Gary ID'd is that you lose elements of the body to the extent that, and I've had this happen, you cannot get a height on a body. Again, you receive a body in a body bag that has come from a house fire or from any kind of fire. And do you remember how I was talking about pugilism? You'll have the body drawn up, and it almost looks like a fetal position. The hips are flexed, the knees are flexed, and they're flexed to the point where they're contracted, where they're drawn in to the torso. Okay, and then the arms and the shoulders actually kind of drop down and draw up like this. You're losing volume. What's the first thing that you're going to lose with fire? A body that's exposed to fire. Well, I think some people would say, "Oh, well, clothing, hair." That might be accurate. Those are very superficial things. What you're going to lose is water weight, because you'd be surprised. I think people would really be surprised. There's the adage that there's an overwhelming percentage of our total body is made up of water. I think we've heard that for years and years, and that is the honest to goodness truth. Even when you look at a bone, a singular bone that has been burned, one of the things that forensic anthropologists do, and there's a forensic pathologist that is involved in this case, by the way, you will actually take, let's say you have a human femur, which is the largest long bone in the body. It's where your hip is, extends down to your knee. It's the most robust. That bone, if you have a suspected guy that is X number of years old, a height in life that you know of, and maybe 300 pounds, the bone itself has an expected weight. Okay. Now, if you pick that bone up, it'll have, if it's not charred completely, it will have kind of a yellowed, almost parchment-like appearance to it, and that goes to heat. And what's happened is the bone is actually cooked from the inside out. You lose all of the water that's contained in there, so the bone is actually lighter when you're holding it. I've actually done this. I've actually held two, I don't think they were femurs. They were two humeruses or humeri. I don't know, the upper long bones in the arms. And one had been subjected to indirect fire, not in the flame, but adjacent, so that it's heat, heat is impacting it. And the other had in fact remained intact. And you could tell there's a precipitous difference between the two weights because the water is all gone out of it. So one of the ways that we get bodies identified, Dave, traditionally has been visual inspection of the body. Now, you can go back to the old days where we would show families the body, you pull it back and, the sheet and everything. And, in Hollywood, people faint or they gasp. Those things do happen, but not so much in a case like this. It would be the height of cruelty to show a family member a body that is charred and contracted and burned beyond recognition. So now you're reliant upon the science. What physical elements are still there that you can say, okay, this is in fact this man who is now currently missing, and we suspect that this is him. It's on his property, and he's deceased. Well, the only thing you have left to turn to is, are his teeth. Here's one other piece to this. I think that's very important. When they received this body, Dave, in the body bag, before that body is ever going to be opened, the bag is ever going to be opened. I can tell you where they did this autopsy. They did it at GBI headquarters, where the state medical examiner's office is. I was actually assigned there for, I think, 7 or 8 of the longest months of my life, working for the state medical examiner for a while in Georgia. The first thing that's going to happen is that body is going to be x-rayed in the bag. And when you're collecting a body at a fire scene, here's what happens. And this happens particularly with structural fires. Many times you will go after the actual body has been lifted out of that space. it's a practice to take a shovel, like a very broad. Have you ever seen these really broad shovels? They're not as big as a snow shovel.
I was going to say kind of like a snow shovel, but
it kind of, but a little bit smaller. We actually scoop stuff up and then put it in the bag along with the body. And sometimes they'll bag it individually. And if they do, that's fine. It will still accompany the body to the morgue. All of those bags, before you open them, will in fact be x-rayed. Okay. And just to give you an idea, when you have like a house fire, or if this is a traditional burn pit, which they're using, which a lot of people in the country have burn pits because they're getting rid of debris, old lumber, trees that are broken down, anything that's there that it can't be hauled off, or they don't want to haul it off. They're just going to burn it right there. So many times what will happen is that when you're x-raying a body, you'll see old nails, screws, washers, nuts. I found old bottle caps. What else have I found? Oh, yeah, bullets. And it's a radio opaque appearance when you're seeing these things. The problem is when you're talking about a burned body and you're trying to assess what's in there, is that because the body has been so anatomically compromised, Dave, that when you look at the x-ray, it's not like going to the hospital and getting an x-ray where you can say, okay, you've got a fracture of the head of your humerus or whatever, it's right here. Well, that thing's displaced now because of fire. And not to mention anything that attached itself to the body as the body is cooking in there. And so it's all askew. There's no real, the standard anatomical orientation that you're looking at when you're reading an x-ray, say like in the hospital, doesn't apply in the morgue. It's all skewed because everything's so contracted. It is outside the norms. So you really have to be creative with the way you're looking at this thing, because you can't, even though you have the x-ray and you've got it up on a light board in the autopsy room, when you open that bag, you still have to be very careful. My suspicion is that when they began to open this bag, they knew from that moment. Can you imagine what an epiphany this was in the morgue? Because I've been there to see this happen, and it is amazing, to say the least. It sends a chill up your spine because you'll have like a house fire. I've had two things that have like really chilled me over the years relative to evidence: finding bullets and finding broken knife blades, particularly the tip of a blade that has been snapped off in a bone after it's been, buried in this person's body multiple times. And you'll see these things and you think, oh my gosh, because at first you don't believe what you're seeing. You say, oh my gosh, did I miss something? I've got to be really, really careful now. The other thing that you contend with, just like, how I was talking about how the bone loses that volume of water that it contains and it changes. Well, bullets, which are a lead core projectile, their dimensions will become compromised in a fire as well. So let's just say we have a projectile that weighs a certain number of grains, okay, which is how bullets are measured in weight, grains. You might look at it and dimensionally, say, for instance, when you're looking at the size of the bullet, if you've got the base of the bullet, you can approximate the caliber. Like, is it a 9mm, a 40 cal? Is it, I don't know, a 22 caliber? In this case, we're looking at 38. Okay. Now, everybody's heard the term 38. Most of the time it's associated with a round that's called a 38 special, which is a revolver round. That's compared to a .380, which is a 380, which is actually a semi-automatic round. Well, dimensionally, their circumference is the same, 0.38 inches in circumference. Well, you lose that volume of the weight of the bullet. Now, if you have the base, you can still approximate the caliber, but you're losing elements of that along the way. What they did take note of, though, is that there were fractured bony bony structures within the body that had been probably fractured by the bullet. The bullet was actually found lodged in a rib. But one of the things they were faced with, they knew that they had .38, but the question is, did it come from a 380 auto or did it come from a 38 special?
Friday. Kick off the Winter Olympics in style with the opening ceremony from Italy, featuring a special performance by Mariah Carey. Celebrate the greatest athletes from around the globe as they come together to go for gold.
Lindsey Vonn, sensational!
The opening ceremony of the Winter Olympics.
Ilya Malinin.
Redefining the sport.
Friday at 8 Eastern, 7 Central on NBC and Peacock.
Dave, I'm showing Dave right now. You guys can't see it obviously because we're not on YouTube yet. But Dave and I, we have a camera between us. I'm showing Dave right now a 9mm
right.
projectile. And
odd that you have it in your pocket as you come to work.
No, I'm not going to. And I'm not going to have it as I'm going through TSA. I can promise
I hope
you that.
not.
But yeah.
Okay.
Hey, do you know that? Did you know I actually frisk myself every time I go to the airport now? I've heard,
wow.
And it's not that I walk around with loose ammunition in my pocket. I always have this, and call me paranoid, I always have this fear that somebody has slipped something into my pocket.
Wow.
And I'm going to get thrown against a wall or something. I always frisk myself. People might think I'm absolutely insane before I go through TSA. I
need to get Bethany Marshall on the phone and see what we got here, buddy. I'm Karen Stark.
And I'm such a Looney Tunes and absent-minded many times. I'll forget, that I've got something, like coins in my pocket and all kinds of things like that.
Man, plus, sir, did you pack your own bag or did somebody pack it for you?
Yeah, that's true.
Wow.
Yeah. So, but the 9mm, and people are very familiar with that round, that's obviously measured on the metric scale. Okay. So when you hear .38, that's the British, what they refer to as the British numbering system. And it's a system that we've used, and it's based on standardized measurements. You think about inches. Okay. So as opposed to metric, you have the British measurement system. And we kind of exchange these back and forth, but I guess the 9mm is probably about as close to a .38 as you can get. Of course, you jump up to a .40 caliber, which obviously is 2 ticks bigger than the 38.
Right.
But the 9 is generally a bit closer to a 38. When a bullet actually hammers into a body, and I say bullet, I need to chastise myself for that because bullets don't slam into bodies, projectiles do. The bullet is the intact cartridge that still it's unfired. So once you send that round downrange and the projectile slams into the body, well, depending upon the makeup, in this case, this 9mm I'm showing is actually a hollow point. This is a Hydroshock. It mushrooms and expands. So with an expanding projectile like this, it'll jump from, say, if it's technically it's supposed to do this. They don't always work. But when it deploys the little wings, the circumference doubles at that point in time. Okay, so you might go from a 9mm up to something that's roughly 15 millimeters in circumference. So you're throwing that into the body. It's supposed to expand and tear up more tissue, and it stays in the body. With a 38, .38, and that's slamming into the body, well, you can have hollow point. You can have hollow point rounds with 38, certainly with .380, and which is a semi-automatic round. 38 Special is a revolver. It turns out, Dave, that they're looking at .380 auto, which means that when they get this projectile out of the body, they're going to try to compare it to other things that they might find around it. Interestingly enough, my understanding is that in the Farris case, they did find another round, and it was laying on the basement floor in the house adjacent to blood.
Which is why there's a question of where was he killed? Because the belief is that he wasn't shot right there at the burn pile, that he was shot elsewhere and then brought to the burn pile. It's the blood and the bullet. Well, they weren't able to go much further than that, Joe. And
Can
that's
I
my
say something
question.
right?
Yes,
let me say
please
something right
do.
here. This is one thing that I can't get past, and this is the medical emergency aspect of this. They thought that he had a medical emergency.
Right. And
medical emergency generally would mean, I think, one of two things. Either you've had a stroke or you've had an MI, an infarction, myocardial infarction, which is, fancy term for common vernacular heart attack. When you look at the burn pile, and I think it was actually his son that found him on the burn pile.
Right.
Okay, so is there any evidence out there of a starter, gas cans, matches, lighters, anything out there? Because if Gary Farris is out there and he's burning debris on his burn pile, it would stand to reason that as an adjunct to this, he would have starter that was out there. Were his fingerprints on any of the starter? If you did have a gas can or whatever it is that you're trying to ignite this thing with, because this is a really hot fire.
Right.
This would have, and they would have known this. The investigators would have known. Yeah, this fire. And my suspicion is that not only did they have regular investigators out there, Dave, they're going to have arson investigators. And by the way, one of the biggest neglected areas of getting respect in forensics are arson investigators. They're probably the most forensic of any forensic that's out there. And people don't talk about them a lot because they're miracle workers as far as I'm concerned. I worked a lot of fire deaths and over the course of my career, and it all looks like a big pile of black mashed potatoes when I'm out there. But for them, they can look at a scene like that. That's not what they're seeing. They see things that I can never see because I don't have that level of training in fire-related deaths or arsons and that sort of thing. They would have been out there to take a look. They would have talked about how deep the fire went. Imagine that. They can actually measure the depth out there, what remnants were out there that might be associated with any kind of ignition that may have started the fire. They would have assessed all that. They would have taken samples, Dave, out there to check for accelerant. Okay.
Right.
Like anything that was associated, if you'd poured gas on it or, lighter fluid or whatever it is, they would have attempted to assess it from that perspective. So anyway, I had to give a shout out to the arson people because they're going to be involved in a case like this. So you got multiple eyes on this case. And then to try to understand, well, if you're having a medical emergency, you're telling me that this guy has a heart attack and falls over into a blazing fire.
Right.
And the heart attack facilitated him dropping dead and just going, graveyard dead right into the fire. No reaction to it whatsoever. People have heart attacks every day, but that doesn't mean that they're not respondent to pain.
They're not all widowmakers. They don't all knock them out right then.
No, they're not. And even with strokes, and I know that there are exceptions, but there's no effort to move off the fire.
Right.
He's just there. So I've got a lot of questions relative to that.
The thing is, Joe, is a lot of those questions are still not answered. Now, when looking at the fire, here's what I was trying to figure out, because you have taught me so many things about death, fires, and things like that. And the one thing that came to my mind, okay, his body is on the burn pile. First of all, how long would it take at an outdoor fire pit? How long would it take to render down that body? And how often would that fire have to be stoked, Joe?
Yeah, it's bonfires, even to a certain degree, to a great degree, probably lesser, but even fireplace fires are one of the most inefficient heat sources there are, because you're constantly losing that radiating heat. Okay.
It's outdoor.
Yeah, it is outdoor. So you're bleeding off heat all the while. And you're not, we're going back to physical science class here. You're not making the best use of the unrestricted chemical chain reaction that's literally occurring before you. Heat source, vaporization, sustainability, and fueling, and retaining that energy.
Well, the one thing that was noticed in the police report, the overwhelming smell of citronella. I had to look it up because citronella is actually something in mosquito repellent.
Yes.
And it is also used in those fire logs that we use to put on the fire to burn hotter, longer without tending to them. And there was an overwhelming smell of citronella at the burn pit.
And you also keep those. We don't have a pool.
Right.
I know people that have a pool, but you've got the big citronella candles that are out there that people will put all around their pool. And you've got the torches.
Got them.
Pour that stuff in.
I've got them because we do have a big pool. I've got those things. Yeah.
And so you smell that. It's a citrusy smell that has, but it's a petroleum-based product. Here's the thing: it burns at a lower temperature. This is really interesting. It actually burns at a lower temperature than, say, if you were using gas, like gasoline. However, when you burn with gasoline, if anybody has ever seen someone, you can see the videos all over the place. Please do not do this at home.
Wow.
If you ever seen anybody have a fire outside and they take a cup of gasoline,
Don't do it.
Don't do it. Pitch it on the fire. What does it do? Well, people will say it explodes. It's not really exploding as much as it is flashing over. And what is the heat source doing? Well, it's consuming all of that. Now, for a time, it will burn, but it's not sustainable. It's great to start a fire with. But when you start to get into something like citronella, and it's kind of a greasy substance, it's got it will sustain for a longer period of time. The heat will be lower, but it will last longer. Okay. It'll burn longer. That's why it's in candles, for instance, or in these torches that we have out by. Can you imagine if you had one of those torches and you put unleaded gas in there and lit that thing? You talk about an explosion within a canister. This repellent actually burns at a lower temp, but it's sustainable. So you could douse an object, even a body, with this stuff, set it ablaze. And this is kind of interesting. I didn't think about this, Dave, until you mentioned it. The smell. Well, bodies, and for those of you that have never smelled a body that's burning, I'll go ahead and tell you what it smells like. Smells like barbecue. Yeah, smells like a barbecue. Dave's raising his eyebrows right now, but that's it. It smells a lot like a pork barbecue. Wow. Now, particularly if you have a body that is unclothed, it smells just like any other tissue burning. I take exception to people that say, "Yeah, I smelled a body that was burning one time," and it is. It's the most unforgettable smell that you've ever smelled. Well, probably you created that in your mind where you knew that it was a human burning, and so automatically you said, well, it smells unlike anything else. Not to me, it doesn't. When I'm around bodies, I can't distinguish the difference between say, pork ribs that might be cooking on a grill when compared to human that is burning. Now, hair smells bad. Clothing will smell bad. It's all offensive. It's just thinking about it. So, but isn't it interesting, though, that if you're a perpetrator, your thought is, well, if I use gas, that might not mask the smell. But I've been using these citronella candles for a while, and they are very distinctive, and they're flammable. Well, the liquid is flammable. I douse something in this stuff. Who's going to be able to tell the difference? Is somebody getting rid of the skeeters around their property? Or somebody getting rid of their spouse? Melody Farris has been found guilty. She is looking probably at the rest of her life in prison. I'm Joseph Scott Morgan, and this is Body Bags.
This is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed Human.